Welcome back to the Raven LeBeau podcast. We continued the story that was my life with a narcissistic person. In this episode, we are going to discuss uh, meeting the family for the first time and how that went, basically. So, grab yourself a drink and your favorite snack, and let's get into it. So I'm going to go back a little in this episode so that you can understand the type of person that I was dealing with, which you probably already understand a little bit, but we're going to make sure that we get everything in here so that you can understand exactly what I was dealing with and why I decided to stay as long as I did with this person. So we had been living together for about 4 months when his family came into town to visit for a few days. So his family, meaning his mother, his sister, who still lived back home where he was from. So I was like, okay, we're still in the honeymoon phase, and it wasn't going that well, with past problems that we had. They weren't major, but you shouldn't have had those in the honeymoon phase. It should have just been lovey-dovey phase, but there were issues right in that phase as well, as you already know. So he told me basically that they were coming into town, they were going to stay with us a day, and they were going to go stay in a hotel so that they could visit other family members. And I was like, okay, no worries. I'm not gonna argue about it. I'm not gonna say no, they can't come. They're your family, my future in-laws, so I'm not gonna say anything. I'm okay with meeting them. Even though we've only been living together for like 4 months. So at that time, I was still working at my old job, which, only paid minimum wage and stuff. So, I was able to work around getting them a hotel at a cheaper price, and everything. So, they were happy about that. So, during the time of us preparing for them to come, he looked at me and he goes, "Do you think that you can take down all your transitioning stuff off your Facebook page?" And I was like, "Excuse me? I mean, that's part of who I am, and I'm sharing, certain parts of my journey on Facebook with my friends and family." I was like, "Why do I need to take them down?" And he's like, "Well, I just don't want my family to say anything, or come out of their faces at you and stuff like that." And I was like, "What, are you embarrassed to be with a trans woman, or are you that in the closet that you don't want people to know that I'm trans?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure a lot of people clock me anyway." I'm like, at the point, it's like, I don't know what you want from me. I'm like, I don't want to remove my stuff from Facebook. I don't want to remove my history of who I am. And, he was like, "Well, I just don't want, any arguments or any fights or anything like that." And in the back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, no, you just don't want them to know that you're dating a trans person because they think you're straight. And that's the whole thing around this, straight men dating trans women. Doesn't make them gay, doesn't make them less of being who they are. They just are into that type of person. They are into whatever aspects turn them on by a trans person, whether it be the femininity, the male genitalia with the femininity. It's a lot. It's a very broad spectrum in that area as to why straight men are attracted to trans women, and there is nothing wrong with that. So I didn't see anything wrong with what I was doing. I didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing. It was a normal thing for me. It was a normal thing for any human being that is into somebody that does not align with society. Okay, let's just put it that way. But like I said, I didn't want to remove my stuff. And I felt a certain way about it because this is part of who I am. It's part of my journey, and this is stuff that you've seen, and that you liked and encouraged, So I think it was about a day before they were supposed to come into town. He asked me again, "Can you please take it down?" So I did. I took it down. I didn't want to argue. I took it down. I took all the stuff down. off of there for him, and then he looked through my Facebook and he's like, okay, good, it's down, we're gonna be good, and I was like, oh, what the hell, why do I have to hide who I am? I'm okay with who I am. I was gay for most of my life. Then I started transitioning to be the person that I was always meant to be. I'm proud of who I am. I was proud of when I was gay. I was proud when I started transitioning. I've never not been proud of who I am. I've never not been me. This was not me. Okay? I don't hide who I am. I've never hidden who I am. And now I have to hide just to be with someone who says they love me, who says they want to build a life together. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But I did it anyway because I didn't want to start a fight and I didn't want him to be fighting with his family while they were in town. So I did it. So he picks them up at the airport and he brings them to the house. And, introductions are made, and they seem like okay people to me. They seem nice enough, whatnot. And we had already gotten the spare bedroom set up for them to stay the night, and whatnot, or 2 nights. I think they stayed 2 nights with us, and then they stayed like a day or two in the hotel, and you know so that they could see other family members that were further out from where we lived. And everything was going good, everything was going fine. I had made dinner for everybody, and everybody had went to bed, and then the next day, they hung out, they talked. I really didn't have time because I was working, the days that they were here, I was working, and so I didn't really have a lot of time to spend with them. But I didn't care, really, to be honest with you. I didn't care. It wasn't a big deal for me. It was his family, so him spending time with his family meant more to me than me spending time with them. And, he didn't care that I wasn't spending time with him, of course. Why would he? He only cares about himself. But I had to work. So I worked. And then I'd come home, then I'd cook, I'd get dinner ready for everybody that was in the house. Um, and I remember, the second day, we'd had dinner and everything, and I had taken my shower and everything, and I was getting ready to go to bed. I was off the next day, and I was like, okay, good, because we were going to go to the city the next day and go on a boat ride in the harbor and everything. We were going to have, a nice day. So I had made a snack before bed, which was just tomatoes, because, I love tomatoes. So I was salting my tomatoes, and his mother was like, aren't you over salting those? Isn't that too much salt? And I'm like, maybe, but I like a lot of salt on my tomatoes. I'm like, what? And, I didn't start arguing or anything. I just salted my tomatoes, and, she went about her business, and I went back to the room, and then I ate my tomatoes, and I brought it up to him, and he's like, oh, that's just her being her. She's always, in people's business and stuff. He's like, don't pay no mind to it. She don't mean nothing by it. I was like, okay, whatever. It didn't bother me. I was like, just, I'm going to put salt the way I want on my food. I'm not, what, I don't care, in-laws or not. So, you know, that was one of the first comments. So the next day, they wanted to get breakfast, and I got up really early so that I could get ready, get dressed, and everything, and get in the shower before everybody else, because I had a lot to do. I had to do my hair, I had to pick out my outfit, I had to do my makeup, all that good stuff. And so I, was in the shower and no boundaries. I mean, lady, hello. She comes into the bathroom while I'm in the bathroom, you know, trying to take my shower. And she's like, oh, honey, where is there a good place to get breakfast around here? And I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of awkward, because I still have male genitalia. So I'm kind of hiding, kind of like covering and kind of facing the wall where only she sees my kind of backside part. And I'm like, Jesus, no boundaries whatsoever. And then I was like, if you just go down the road, there's a like a breakfast diner down the road. You could just walk to it. It's like a couple minutes away. And she's like, okay, thank you, sweetheart. And she left. I was like, rude. I'm like, who walks in on somebody in the bathroom? I mean, yeah, I probably should have locked the door, but I didn't think I had to because I got up really early before anybody would be up. Oh, Lord have mercy. So then I get out of the shower, I getting dried off. He's still in the bed. I don't want to wake him up. So I started doing my makeup, get my hair ready and all, the normal stuff that us girls do. And he gets up, go to take a shower. I said, your mother walked in on me in the bathroom while I was taking my shower this morning to ask me where to get breakfast at. And he kind of laughed, and then he looked at me and he had this horror look on his face. He's like, "Did you see anything?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Did she see your, you know what?" And I'm like, "Did she see my dick?" I'm like, "No, she did not." I was like, I was turned around to the back of the wall, so all she saw was like my side and my back. So she saw like a butt cheek. I was like, that's about all she saw. And he was like, "Oh, thank God." I was like, "What?" I was like, "That's all you care about? You don't care about the fact that your mother is rude and walks in on people in the bathroom?" I was like, "Okay, whatever." I was like, "Okay, whatever. Moving on. I'm not even gonna start because I'm gonna have a good day. I'm not gonna start an argument. I don't want there to be any kind of argument today." So I finished my makeup, I got my hair done, and then I got my clothes put on. So I put on like a skirt with stockings, garter belt, a nice little blouse top, and then I put on knee high stiletto boots. And I was feeling comfortable. I was feeling sexy, comfortable, like I like to feel, my normal look. And I grabbed my pea coat, that just so I could stay warm because it's kind of chilly, day. So I had that, and it kind of goes down to like below my knee, so it would keep me kind of warm. And I was fully dressed and everything, and we were ready to go. We all got in the car, and everybody was looking at me, like, "Oh, well, don't you think you overdressed to go walk around the city?" And I'm just like, "Excuse me?" I'm like, "I'm dressing the way I like to dress." This is what I'm saying in my head. I didn't say this out loud because I didn't want to start a fight and everything. And I just looked at him, and he looked at me like, "Don't say nothing," because he knows I don't got no filter. And I will say something, but it's his family. They're here. I'm not going to say anything. I just said, "Well, this is how I like to dress. This is comfortable for me." You know, and then she's like, "Oh, well, how can you walk all day in stilettos like that?" I was like, "Because my feet are used to it." I was like, "I'm used to walking in heels. I walk in heels every day." I'm like, "That's who I am. And I like my heels." So, I just told her, "Oh, I'm used to walking in them. And then the rest of that was in my mind. Like, I want to say something really bad, but I didn't. And so we get to the train because we could take the train into the city because driving and parking would be a nightmare. So we got on the train went to the city, everybody's chit chatting and talking. I put my headphones on. I'm sorry. I didn't want to deal with it. I wanted to de stress. So I put my headphones on. Well, Mr. Man comes up, he's sitting next to me. He leans over. He's like, "You think it's rude that you have your headphones on and other people are talking?" I'm like, "I'm not in their business. I'm not talking to them. That's your family talking to each other." I'm like, "I'm de stressing. Your mother has already stressed me out. Okay?" I'm like, "I am trying to stay calm." He's like, "Well, can you just stay in the moment with the rest of us?" I'm like, "I could if I wanted to, but I'm not going to." And he looked at me and I was like, "Sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm just trying to de-stress." I was like, "Give me a few more minutes and then I'll take my headphones off." So he just looked at me. I was like, "Look, I'm trying to compromise here because I am stressed already. Okay? Just trying to compromise. Just trying to de-stress. And you don't even want me to de-stress. But this is him. All about him and what he wants. All about his image, not caring how people treat the people that is supposed to be his partner." Just saying. So I was like, okay. I listened to, finished this to a song, then put my headphones away, and, was just scrolling on my phone, like playing games and stuff on my phone and stuff like that. He had a problem with that as well. I'm like, "I'm on a train ride. I don't want to be in their conversation." I'm like, I don't know anything about the family. I don't know all these things they're talking about. I'm feeling like completely like I don't know any of this. What I'm not, I'm here. I'm being nice. I'm here. You know, but it wasn't good enough. So I put my phone away and just sat there listening to their stories, nodding my head and smiling. And then I see out the corner of my eye, he's on the phone scrolling through porn. Really? Scrolling through porn and his hookups. Really? Can't even give it a break for your parent in town? Mm. Nope, I didn't want to say nothing. Didn't want to start nothing. So we get to the city and, we start walking around and, they're talking, they're showing, different parts of the city to his mother, his sisters, and we walk down by the water because we got to get on a boat ride, at a certain time. And I'm just like, okay, I'm walking with them and everything, and everybody's talking, and I'm just walking, holding on to him. And I'm just like, okay, hey, this is his family, not mine. I'm as comfortable as I'm gonna be. And occasionally somebody would say something to me and I would talk to them and, have a little conversation, and that was it. So before we got on the boat, we went to have lunch. And I didn't want to kind of like mess up my lipstick and stuff like that, and have to reapply because I don't like doing that. So I was trying to order like a finger food, like chicken fingers or something. Well, even what I ordered was an issue for his mother. Well, I'm like, really? She's like, oh, honey, why are you ordering something from the kids' menu? Why don't you get something like a hamburger or something? I'm like, lady, really? I'm like, well, I like chicken fingers. And plus, I don't want to mess up my lipstick. And then she didn't have nothing to say. And I was like, okay, well, at least I can enjoy my lunch in peace. And, he was like, his sister had ordered a salad and she wanted like extra, extra dressing. So she like drenched it in dressing. And I just looked at him and he was like, I know, that's disgusting. Drenching it in dressing. There's like, you get no salad. I'm like, okay. You talk bad about your family behind their back. Okay, got it. I was like, but I already knew this because, he'd already talked bad about his family behind their back before. So I already knew this. It was not, new to me. And I would learn that he talks about everybody bad behind their back. But in front of their face, he's cool. He's nice. He's Mr. Good Guy. Behind your back, good luck. I'm just going to say it. Behind your back, good luck. Because every time I turned my back, trust me, he was calling me a bitch, a whore, something nasty, always saying that I was a bad person. But we'll get into that in another video. But anyway, we finished up lunch and everything, and we got on the boat. Now, understand that I get seasick, motion sickness from boats. I mean, ever since I was little. Okay, and I know it's funny and everything, and I still laugh at it. But when I was little, I was on a boat with my grandparents, and they were fishing, and I couldn't get off the bottom of the boat the whole entire time. I couldn't stand up for nothing. Okay, they said, "Oh, you just don't have your sea legs," and I mean, yes, is it funny to this day? Yes, it's still funny. Was it traumatizing? A little, because I'm like, why can't I move? Why can't I get off this bottom of this boat? And I'm just a kid. And then I figured out, later on in life, every time I would get on a boat, was not good for me. I mean, I could walk, on a boat, but it was not very good for me. I would get dizzy. I would get kind of nauseous. So he knew this already, but he let them plan a boat trip. Okay. He's like, oh, we'll get you some Dramamine or something. I said, that doesn't work. I'm not good on boats, period. So we got on the boat and he's holding on to me because I started like wobbling a little, and my head was kind of spinning a little. So he held on to me, which was very nice. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I just need to sit down, and then just, not move. And so he's like, well, we'll get inside, we'll sit down, and he was being nice to me, which was kind of a shock, you know. And his mom was like, are you okay, sweetheart? I'm like, no, I'm not good on boats. And she's like, oh, that's a shame. That's bad. And I'm like, okay. I'm just not good on boats. And I'm just like, okay, here she goes again. So I didn't think anything of it. And then she's like, she wanted, to get a beer, and she wanted this, she wanted that. So he went to get her this, he went to get her that, and all this. And he would check on me to make sure I was okay. And do you want something to drink? I was like, no, I'm nauseous. I don't want anything. And he was like, well, I know that you have problems with boats, but I thought you'd be fine on one of these boats. I'm like, no, it's all boats. I'm like, I told you this before. I was like, but I'm doing this for you and your family, and once we get off of this, I'll be fine. So, we did the boat ride around the harbor and everything. It pulls back in, I wobble off the boat. And as soon as I'm off the boat, walking a little bit down the pier, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's always been something about boats I can't deal with. So I'm just like, okay, I'm good now, whatnot. And so his mom looks at me and says, are you better now, honey? And I'm like, yeah, I'm better. And at this point, her, I don't want to say nagging, but her, way of talking to me was starting to get under my skin. It was starting to work my last good nerve. And all I wanted to do was take the back of my hand and pimp slap her. But I didn't do it. I kept that in my mind and smiled. You know, these things, go through your head, with in-laws, and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm signing on to be with this man, possibly marry this man, and these will be my in-laws. I'm like, I'm trying to be nice. But in-laws, some are good and some are bad. You never know what you're gonna get. So I was like, okay, let me just get through this day. So we walked around the city a little bit more, showed a few more sights, and then we got back on the train and went back home. So once we got home, they were going to pack their stuff up so that they could go to the hotel. He was going to take them to the hotel that they were going to be staying in. So I was like, okay, so got packed up and all that, and they were on their way. And finally, I could breathe and relax in my own home. I could walk around naked again. I didn't have to worry about tucking, to keep everything hidden. I didn't have to worry about stuff in my chest the whole time they were here, so I could relax. And, they were gone for the next 2 days. And boy, was he bad mouthing them the whole time that they were out of his sight. He was bad mouthing them. And I'm just like sitting there, yeah. I'm like, if this is how he talks about his family behind their back, I would sure not like to know how he talks about me behind my back, because I know he does. So I'm just sitting there like, yeah, yeah, mm-hmm. I'm not trying to agree or not disagree or anything like that, but I'm listening to some of the horrible things that he's saying about his own family, and I'm just like, no, no. Because, see, I don't talk bad about people behind their back. If I got something bad to say, I'm going to say it to your face. That's just the way I am. I'm sorry. If I don't like you, I'm going to tell you to your face. So I'm just like, okay, all this I'm finding out as we're going through this relationship, the kind of person that he really is behind this mask that he has up in front of his face. Okay, because this is still the mask time. It has not been unmasked yet. And I was like, okay, I went to work, and everything, and we lived our life, like we normally did, had sex, and no talking, just sex, not good for me, but good for him. Or so he says it was good for him. Who knows? And him always on his phone scrolling, texting, and all this. And yet, when I post pictures on any of my social media, he didn't comment. But as soon as he sees somebody else's, he's liking, commenting, and saying sexual things about their body parts. Just saying. You could say the same thing to my pictures. It might actually turn me on, once in a while, to hear that you really do find me attractive. But yeah, we went back to normal, for the couple of days, and then his mom come back to spend the last night with us before they take him to the airport. So I'm like, I'm dreading this, I'm like, okay, I gotta stay stuffed till after I go to bed, I gotta stay tucked after I go to bed, all this is very uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable thing to have to stay in all day, all night till you go to bed, where no one's gonna come into your room. So I made dinner, and everything, and when we finished dinner, I put the dishes on to wash and everything. Then I told everybody I'm going to bed, because I have to work tomorrow, and I have to be up, and it was nice having you, nice seeing you guys, nice getting to know you, all this. And they were like, okay, good night, and all this, and I went to bed. And then he's like, oh, they're going to leave at this time, and you want to get up to say goodbye. It's like, if I get up, I've got to put everything on. I'm like, man, come on. Do you know how long it takes me? I'm like, I got to put on fake breasts, got to make my little bit of tissue I've got there look like cleavage. I'm like, Lord, okay. So I got up, did what I had to do to, get presentable and say goodbye to the family. Well, as I was saying goodbye to the family, his mother had one last quip. She goes, why do you try so hard? I'm like, what? Try so hard? She's like, why are you overly nice and do things for people? You're just trying too hard. I'm like, um, that's who I am. I'm like, that's my personality. I treat people with respect. I'm like, I don't know what you got out of it, but I was trying to be respectful and nice to you. But now all bars are off, lady. And she looked at me, and I was like, you want me to tell you what I really think? No, I just want you to go. Bye-bye. And she left, and I was like, oh, thank God. I almost lost my tongue there for a minute. And I was like, whew, rein it in, of it, rein it in, rein it in. And I was just like, oh my God, rein it in, Raven. Come on, you can do this. And so it was like, okay, I reined it in, and I was like, calm. She just looked at me and gave me this look, and I was like, just leave before I lose it, before I blow, because I'm about to blow. And he saw that it was coming, so he kind of rushed him out the door. He's like, well, I'll be back. I'm going to drop him off at the airport. And, oh, it was nice meeting you. Da, da, da. All this good fake goodbye stuff, right? And so I was like, okay, thank God they're out of here. Oh my God, thank God. I almost lost it. I'm like, Raven, just calm down. You got this. And so he drove to the airport. He came back home. Well, on his way home, he calls me. He's like, "Oh, when I get home, I gotta tell you something." I'm like, "What do you gotta tell me?" I'm like, "Oh, good Lord." So he didn't want to tell me on the phone, which is something that he did a lot of during our relationship. Like, I got something to tell you, or I got something to talk to you about, but I'll talk to you later. And then it's nothing really important or serious. But he's got me thinking all day, like, what the fuck is this? But that'll come later, as you'll see. But so he comes home. He's like, "Oh my God, you'll never guess what happened." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "My sister found a post that you didn't delete on Facebook." I'm like, "And?" I was like, "You went through the Facebook page. You should have caught it." He was like, "Well, I guess I missed it." I was like, "Oh well, so what?" And he was like, "Well, they're like, oh my God, you're dating a trans girl," and he was all on this mode where it's a 50-50 thing where he's got to be, right in the middle. He's got to agree to this, but disagree, to where it makes him the good guy. So he's like, oh, well, she's fully transitioned. She's all woman now. She all her body parts are woman. There's nothing, it's just that she was born a man. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I haven't finished transitioning yet. I was like, how the fuck you gonna lie to these people? I was like, oh no. So I did not hold my tongue because I was tired of holding my tongue. I was like, Raven, this is it. Just do it. Just say it. I was like, look, if you ain't proud to be with a trans woman, then don't be with me. I was like, because I'm proud of who I am. And if you can't be proud of that, then get off. Just leave. Leave me alone. I was like, I'll go about my life. He's like, no, I don't want to lose you. You are what I love. You're what I want to be with. I envisioned you. I manifested you for me. And I was like, you didn't manifest nothing. I'm a person. You didn't manifest me. I've been around this earth for so many years. You didn't manifest me, okay? I'm here and I've been here, okay? And I've been through struggles in my life. I was like, no, you did not just manifest me like you a magic god or something. I was like, number two, let's just get this straight. If you are not proud of who I am as your partner, then hit the road. Leave me alone. I was like, because I'm not going to hide who I am. You asking me to take that off of Facebook was an insult and a slap in my face. I was like, I am so done with hiding who I am to please you. If you're not okay with it, that's not my problem, okay? Just because you're with a trans woman does not make you gay, okay? If that's what you're afraid of. And I'm just like, why am I explaining myself to you? I was like, I don't need to explain myself to you. You're either with me or you're not. You either like me for who I am or you don't. I'm not changing. I am becoming who I was always meant to be. Okay? And that's it. If people don't get it, don't like it, that's not their choice in life. That's my choice in life. It's what I have to live with. Okay? And he just looked at me and I was like, I'm not mad at you. You said you stood up to your family for me. That's a great thing to do. But at the same time, I feel like you didn't quite stand up because you changed who I was to better fit the narrative so that they would look at you differently. And they would look at you like, okay, he's still straight. He's still a good guy. But you know how your mother feels about it. She's very biblical, okay? And you know how she feels about it because she does not like the fact that you like trans women. And you're just going to have to get over that. You're just going to have to live with who you are. So that was the meeting of the in-laws, which I can say did not go very well at all. So the next thing that we're going to get into is meeting the friends. And let me tell you, that did not go well at all. Well, no, that one went better than the family. Let's put it that way. That one went much better than the family. Because the friends, they were really cool. They were really nice. But he didn't want to introduce me to them. He wanted to keep me a secret. He wanted to say that, he was only not introducing us because, he wanted us to get to know each other. He wanted us to, be together and have time together, by ourselves. And I was like, okay, and it's your friends. I mean, I don't care if I meet them now or way later down the road. It doesn't matter to me. But according to him, his friends have been asking when they're going to meet me, when he's going to bring me around, because when we first met on the dating site, he had told them all about me. He told them that I'm what he always wanted. He could find himself marrying me, settling down with me, all this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Whenever you want to introduce me, I'm fine with that. I didn't rush him. I didn't say I had to meet his friends right away. His friends wanted to meet me. So he decided that he was going to throw a barbecue to meet the friends. All right, no worries. We got the stuff for the barbecue. I was preparing food. I was making food. They were going to bring dishes of their own. They were going to bring alcohol, stuff like that. And we were going to have a nice little barbecue and get to know each other. So, I got dressed up nice like I always do, and to meet the friends. And he was like, "Oh, you look really sexy. You look really hot." He's like, "I'm really proud of you." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Fine." I'm just meeting the friends. I'm like, no big deal for me. I've met, exes of mine's friends before. It's no big deal. So we have everything set up. He's got the grill started, and people start arriving. Now he's out in the back, getting the grill done, and I'm just like, people are starting to arrive. And I'm like, I can't just meet these people at the door. I'm like, your friends are here. And he's like, oh, let me get the door. And I'm like, okay. So I go back in the kitchen to finish, preparing stuff, getting, the little dishes that I was finishing up finished. And one of the first friend comes in. They were a couple, and they were a very nice couple together. And he introduced me, and we started talking, and they were like, "Oh, what's it like to be transitioning?" And he gave me this look like, "Don't talk about that," and I'm just like, they asked me, you know and so I just told him, "Oh, well, it's just something that I wanted to do all my life because I just felt like, something was wrong, with who I was before." And that's where I left it. And then his next set of friends arrived, and they they're a really funny couple. She's hilarious. He's kind of like low key, kind of sit back, but she's kind of out there hilarious. And I was like, okay, I like. And I was talking and everything, and so she was asking me, "Oh, you guys met here and there," and we were talking, and he came in, and I was talking about transitioning, and he gave me that look again. So I was just like, Lord have mercy. So I started like a normal conversation about her life, and stuff like that. And I was just like, they're gonna keep asking me these questions because they know I'm trans. They know that we met on a trans dating app. They're gonna keep asking me these questions. I'm like, I'm not supposed to answer them. So everybody was out back, and I was in there, getting all the drinks together, to take out and everything. And he comes in to grab some of the meat. He's like, don't talk about your transition stuff around them. They don't need to know all that stuff. And I'm like, they're asking me questions. I'm supposed to be rude and not answer the questions. He's like, I know how you're going to answer the questions, and you don't have to get in full detail. I was like, I'm not going to do full detail. I'm like, I'm just going to answer the question to answer what they're asking me. I was like, if it happens to need a detail, then yes, I'm going to say what it needs to be said. And he was like, well, that's not appropriate. Okay. Not around my friends. And I'm like, your friends know you're dating a trans woman. They have questions because you've never dated a trans woman with them around before. I'm like, but whatever. I'm not gonna start a fight. I'm not gonna start an argument. So we're all talking. We're all eating. We're all having fun. It was really nice meeting the friends and everything and getting to know them. And the night is starting to wrap up and everything. And one of them asked me, a question about transition, about surgeries and stuff like that. And at this point, I had a doctor, but I didn't have the referrals or the specialist or any of that. I was just, getting established with my doctor here. And I told him, I said, well, it's like a journey, you have to go through certain steps in order to get it. So I'm still, going through those steps here, like I was back home. They didn't quite continue here. It's a different rule in a different state. So, I didn't go into full detail, which I think they were kind of wanting me to go into full detail, but I didn't. I just kind of left it at that. And I saw the look on his face was like a relieved look. And I was like, really, I'm not going to embarrass anybody. I know how to act in a public forum. I'm like, come on, dude, seriously? But we finished the night, everybody left, I got hugs, from the girls, the guys, I gave them a hug as well. It's a little uncomfortable for the guys, giving me a hug, but they gave me one, and it was like, okay, we could have just shook hands, I would have been fine with that, if it was awkward, but the night ended, and he was like, he's like, oh, you did so well, me and my friends, I'm so proud, I'm happy that all you guys met, and that they like you and that you like them. I was like, the only problem was you. And he's like, excuse me. I was like, the only problem here was you. You were the one who had an issue with anything we talked about dealing with who I was. I was like, that's you. You had the issue, not me. He's like, I'm still new to dating a trans woman out in the public. You got to give me time. I was like, I'm not forcing anything on you. I'm like, I'm going to be me regardless of what happens. But I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to hide who I am. I will give you time to catch up. I will play by your rules, so to speak. I will give you that respect. But you need to give me the respect in return that if I need to talk to you about these things, you will listen so that I can talk to you about them because I don't have any friends here. All my friends are back where I left from my home, and your friends are your friends. They may turn out to be good friends that I can talk to about things, but it's still going to be awkward because they're your friends, not mine. And we didn't fight. It was just a normal conversation, and he's like, well, I don't like it. I was like, well, you're going to have to learn to like it. You're going to have to get used to it. You're dating a trans woman who is proud of who she is and who does not want to hide, who, if someone has a question, I'm willing to answer their questions because I want them to be educated about trans people. I don't want them to be ignorant around trans people. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable around trans people. We're people just like anybody else. I was like, you're uncomfortable around me when we go out in public, and I know this. And I always try to make it more comfortable with you by joking with you, by not touching you, by not holding your hand, by not doing any of that stuff that would make you uncomfortable. If you take my hand, then I take yours. That's it. I'm like, I work with you, but you don't work with me on this. And I need somebody to talk to about this because it's stressful at times. And he was like, okay, I get that. But if we work together, then I'll get to the point where I'm very comfortable being seen in public with you. And I'm like, fine, whatever. I'm like, I don't care. But I'm going to be me in public. I'm not going to hide who I am. So he was like, well, you have to understand, I'm new to this. I'm like, you're not new to this. You've been fucking trans women and cross dressers and sissies for over a year. And he's like, well, that's behind closed doors. I'm not going out in public with them. I'm like, okay. So you're ashamed of even your sexual side. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. That's in the back of my head, okay? Let's just get that straight. I was like, wow, you're really fucked up. I was like, I thought I was messed up. You take the cake. I'm like, I'm just confused about, my outside matching my inside. You're confused on so many levels. And I was like, I ain't got time for this. And in my head, I'm like, is it going to get any better? If I stay, will he be more comfortable? Will he, you know, be able to be with a trans person? And I didn't know the answers to these questions because there is no way he was going to give me the answers to that. So I simply told him, look, we'll go at a pace that is comfortable for both of us. And that way we don't disrespect each other. We stay true to each other and we stay in a loving relationship, which we already know it was kind of a loving relationship, but it was also kind of a war relationship from past episodes. But I'm trying my best to have the person in my life that the mask was of, not who the real person is, because I hadn't seen that real person yet. I had just seen the mask. And so what he was portraying to me was that he wanted me in his life. He loved me. I was very sexy to him. He desired me. And I was good with all these. But at the same time, his actions didn't show what he was saying was true. So after meeting the friends, I kind of just sat back for a little bit, and just kind of took everything in. And I was just like, okay, I've met the family, I've met the friends. I was like, the family probably are looking at me like I'm a joke because he's been through, different people and they know how he is. And I'm pretty sure his family knew he was a narcissist from the get-go because family does, and they don't care. They encourage the narcissist to be the narcissist that they are, and the person that comes into their life, they just laugh at them because they know what's going to happen, overall. So I was probably just the laughing joke of the family. But the friends, they would turn out to be some of my friends still today, and we may not be as close as we used to be, but we're still in each other's lives in some sort of way. But we'll get into that later on as well. But I'm just here thinking to myself, how can I get this man to be the person that he says he is when that's not his actions? And I'm trying to be in a relationship with the person that he is pretending to be. So I work on that, I work with him, try to give him what he needs, try to, understand him. And at the same time, I've gone through all this with him already, and he's not understanding me at all or trying to understand me. So that night after meeting the friends, we had, sex because he's a very sexual person. He has to have sex all the time, which is fine. That's fine. I don't have an issue with sex all the time because, I have a very high sex drive myself when I'm turned on with the person. So we had sex that night, and it was like a different kind of sex. It was like not a passionate sex, not a porn kind of sex. It was kind of like a melancholy sex, if you know what that is. And it was like we weren't going through the motions. We were mid passion, but not complete passion. We were mid performing, but not performing. We were right there in the middle. And it was kind of an interesting feeling. Did I get off? No. Did he get off? Of course he did. But the feeling that was there was just this, I don't know, it was just this melancholy feeling that it was just right there in the middle. Like, sex had just been something that we were doing out of habit, you know? And once we had finished and gotten cleaned up and everything, we were laying in the bed. He said to me, again, I really appreciate how respectful you were with my family and meeting my friends. He's like, it's just going to take me time to be comfortable with you and being in public with you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give him this time that he needs. And I'm going to see where it goes from there. And he rolled over on his side. I rolled over behind him. I spooned him, and we went to sleep. And that was the family meeting, the friends meeting, and understanding that he was not comfortable with what he thought he was comfortable with. But we'll get into that more in future episodes as well as he starts to develop more of the personality that he really is. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Until next time, bye!